And welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And I am Strange Crypto, but not very strange.
And we are celebrating Women in Translation Month, a month dedicated to women writing in other languages. Today we head to Japan with Yuko Tsushima, who we've explored once other on this channel, but I think this video is actually coming out before that other one, oddly enough.
That's a tongue twister time loop there.
If you are new to these parts, we take a conversational approach to literature, exploring some of the most important stories that have influenced even today's writers. We'd like to thank our patrons out there who have supported us on this journey, and you can hit that subscribe button down below to join us for more of the adventure.
And as always, we start off with publication information. A Very Strange Enchanted Boy was published in 1985, and our version was translated by Geraldine Harcourt.
As we'll talk about in our other video on her that we're releasing later this month, she is the daughter of Osamu Dazai, one of the most infamous writers in Japan, and it just runs in the family. She writes the I novel, which if you're newer to Japanese literature, it's a very confessional, a very honest and deep look at kind of oneself, where sometimes they're injecting even more autobiographical elements than normal, but it's still fiction, if you will.
And we came upon this story via the Oxford Book of Japanese Short Stories. Highly recommended. We're going to be doing several stories from this.
So what we're going to do is a quick plot summary, because that makes no sense for a Yuko story, because they're not very plot-driven. And then we'll do some more of the discussion and analysis of what's happening. It opens with the narrator remembering kind of this moment in time where she remembers hearing the Nat King Cole song, Nature Boy, about a strange enchanted boy. And now Michie is our narrator, and she is shocked when her 6-year-old boy announces he's found infinity.
Kids say the darndest things.
They look at these winged mirrors in their bathroom and the reflections bouncing back and forth. And the boy asks when numbers end, and Michie tells him they do, but it works the same way as if they don't. The boy frequently becomes fixated on things like infinity, ghosts, and monsters. Eventually, he even becomes fixated on death and upsets his mother to say such things. Sounds like my son, goodness. He'd get in trouble at school, and Michie is upset when other mothers judge her, as she's doing the best that she can without a father to raise her boy. She's worried the boy won't focus on things important to everyday life, as he rambles on about atoms and molecules. One day, the father asks Michie, is she really just egging the boy on? Now, the narrator recalls how the boy was an attempt to become between the father and his wife. Dun, dun, dun. And the father gives her money once a year on his visit, and she thinks that she should be stricter. Kind of in plot. Summarizing a Yuko Tsushima story is it's like murdering what she creates. You know what I mean? It's like when you try to create a summary of a Clarice Lispector, it just doesn't work, right?
This is like picking up spaghetti with your hands instead of a strainer. It's not going to work very well. We're trying, but it's difficult.
Right, and it's not to be an insult to her plot. It's meant to be, this is actually, I think, honoring what she accomplishes, because it is enjoyable, I think, to read a lot of her stories. Now, you may not necessarily relate. It's maybe more of a window for you, a window into a different life, which I think it is for us, but I also see parts of parenting and my son in the story too, as we're jumping into our analysis and discussion. But the first thing I would ask Mr. Crypto is, the title is this is A Very Strange Enchanted Boy. Whose story is this?
For me, when I went into this story, I probably, like most people, thought that it was going to be about a very young enchanted boy, and that the mother is going to talk about him, and maybe there was some fantasy element or supernatural element to it, something of that sort. But then we figure out that it's actually not his story, and it's more her story.
Well, is it her story, or is it her reaction to the boy, almost, right? Like a perspective on it. And if you didn't know, Michie means 3,000 blessings. So even in like the title of her name, we kind of are already working in blessings, you know, like this boy. And we're also working in 3,000, like numbers, right? The first thing this boy discovers is, I found infinity. But I think the point isn't that the boy Is the point that the boy exists? Is that what the point of this story is? Where are we going with this one, do you think?
I don't know. Being that towards the end of the story, I started to lean that this is more of the mother's story or reactionary reflection upon her own life and how she's raising her son. No, but then without the boy, then there is no story. So it's kind of like they're the same sides, or they're different sides of the same coin.
It's hard to break down this story, right? Because you have the situation of a single mother raising a son, and automatically, to the point and line in this story, we're throwing judgments most likely on her. Oh, did she do something wrong? Not like, oh, she probably chose to raise this boy on her own or something like that. But I feel like we can all agree, though, that there's this collision in the story when we find out that this is, I don't want to call it a whoops-a-baby, right? Because that's usually when you're in the relationship and you don't want the relationship to end. This is the opposite. This is the glue baby, right? Where I wanted a relationship with that man, but he's already married. So I thought if I got pregnant, he would leave her for me, kind of like the magnet baby, if you will. And I feel like that greatly transitioned the story from this moment of raising a boy to using the boy to try to create and alter this relationship with this man. And it greatly, I feel like, transitioned my feeling on the story.
For much of the story, I thought, oh, wait a minute, is she the housekeeper or is she the nanny? Maybe she's pretending that this son is hers. And then when you get that kind of bombshell drop, you're like, oh, that puts it into a lot more perspective. And again, like we've said many times before, that's going to say a lot about you of what type of judgment you put on the mother once you find this information out. And not that that's wrong or right, that's just what it's going to be. And again, the story focuses so heavily on the son of him, having trouble with numbers and being obsessed with death, and she's telling you all this information about her and the things that her son does and what happens to him at school. And then when you get that switch at the end, you realize that it's her story. At least for me, that's how I kind of interpreted it.
Well, and I think that's so true for a lot of parents, right? The way we force them to do certain things, and it is usually for their benefit, right? But we see a very honest, self-interested Michie in the story. Like, he's focusing on these things that don't matter, like atoms and molecules. He needs to do something useful. And she's already trying to mold him to go a certain way when science is an important subject that you could encourage a child to explore more of. But that's not what Michie wants, right? And we have those quotes where they say, just how much could parents feel for their children without fantasies, right? Because I think the fantasies sometimes are what allow us to believe in what that person's potential could be, right? And they have the other quote, parents can only doing their self-indulgent dreams into their children. And I think, to me, that was the quote of the piece right here, where this is talking about how sometimes parents are injecting themselves into their children instead of trying to let their children be whatever they want. She wanted this child to lure the man away as opposed to just wanting the child. She wants to inject into him, these are the things you need to do, not the things that you like to do, like molecules and atoms, for example, too. And I think this is important for us as peoples, when we raise children, to think about those sort of things, too.
That was also my favorite quote of the story, that sometimes parents are trying to relive their own personal glory days or fulfill their own fantasies that they failed at their own life at. I remember I chuckled to myself when reading this because the thing that popped in my head immediately was the movie Varsity Blues, and I don't want your life. and I thought, that's the truth of the matter, is a lot of parents push upon certain sports or agendas that they have for their children instead of just letting their children be what they want to be. And this, young man was happy learning about infinity, or happy learning about monsters, or wanted to learn about death. And although we haven't talked a lot about the son, I think he's written in a very unique way that I was trying to diagnose him. And I was even talking with my wife about this child and saying, do you think he has, autism, or, what is there? Because even in the story, they call him, a couple of kind of hurtful terms of, suggesting that he is, not, quote, normal.
Well, and I think Michie, I think she's working towards seeing him, right? Because we had even quotes where they say someone had told her she should count herself lucky because she'd been able to have the child. But she hadn't been so sure. She had wanted to watch the child grow with the man there day by day. So it's like she's constantly drawn back to the boy's usefulness to her, never focusing on her usefulness to the boy. And I think that's probably the very piecing thing to say is like, oh, well, you should focus on the children. The children are the most important things too. But I think being a parent, you are still an individual. You are in a relationship. You own, quote unquote, a part of the responsibility of raising this child. Well, for single mothers, a lot of the responsibility, right? If not all of it. And you can't lose sight of that personal aspect too. Sometimes you eschew it, sometimes you put it aside. But here with Michie, I feel like it's the opposite side where she's prioritizing that so much, she's losing sight of her son underneath things.
Agreed. It's the idea of when you're in an airplane and the mask comes down, you got to put your own first on, and then you help the other people. You help your child put their mask on. And I think that Michie is putting her mask on, but then she's putting on her mask on her son as well.
Well, either way, I think this is a interesting story. I think Tsushima, Yuko, from the very limited exposure that we've had to her, I see a lot of myself and some of that relationships that I have with my son that some people don't want to admit. Now, I'm not saying you go to the extreme like this here, but I think there are elements of this that you do need to kind of recognize as a person. So anytime literature can make you look and see yourself and maybe even evaluate things differently, I think it's doing its job. I think it's doing its purpose when you can see things in it beyond just enjoyment, but it's also almost maybe even just a little bit instructional sometimes too, to bring out some of that truth that you would never admit in real life to another person.
Only admit to yourself.
So Crypto, how did this one hit you on a very subjective scale?
I loved this story. As you kind of talk there, I reminisce and think about it. This story can provide a lot literary usefulness. I thought it was entertaining. I also like the fact that you were able to self-reflect about being a parent and being a father, being a son. But me, who has no children, I think I still can get something out of this as well, as it allows me a glimpse into that life of being maybe a single parent. And I can empathize more with, wow, what a struggle it must be to be able to maintain your own personal goals and fantasies as an individual, and then also your child's, and then have those coalesce together. That's like the most impossible job there is, yet many of you out there make it work, and that's just really, really impressive to me. So I'm going to give this one an 8 because I think that it's very useful and I enjoyed it.
I'm going to go a little bit lower on that one, not because I think it's a bad story, but I just think it was just maybe like a 7 on the experience scale. I definitely think I resonated more with Flames a little bit more. I don't know why that is. I think I'm still trying to learn Tsushima's voice. Tsushima has such a confessional and honest voice that, like, it's almost like the format that we do here with starting with the plot. Like, we almost need to just come to agree that let's just not do the plot breakdown and just kind of explore maybe what some of the meanings are in the story. Because I think really that's where the fruit is for her writing. And I think that's maybe a place where some people can find more truth than they can even talking with their best friend and others. And I think that's very, very valuable. So I highly recommend it, particularly for those out there that are looking for that type of experience. So guys, patrons out there that have supported us, we appreciate, what you do for us. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and we'll leave links down below where you can check out Yuko Tsushima's playlist to hear more of our talks. With that said, guys, we hope to see you on the journey. Una out.
Peace.